What is going on here? What are you doing? Get away from him right now. Tony Adams walked through his front door and froze. His son sat on the staircase, face bruised and swollen, and the maid had her hands all over him. The briefcase hit the floor. Sean sat on the third step, trembling. His face was marked red welts across his cheek, a fresh bruise darkening near his temple. And Jennifer Cortez, the woman Tony hired just 2 weeks ago, had both hands cupped around the boy's face, fingers moving in strange, deliberate patterns. Sean wasn't screaming, wasn't pulling away. He was watching her like she was the only person in the world. Tony's heart slammed against his chest. "Step back," he said, voice sharp as broken glass. Jennifer's hands dropped. Sean flinched. "Daddy, come here, Sean." Now, the boy hesitated. That split second of hesitation cut deeper than Tony expected. Sean finally moved. Tony pulled him close, hands checking his face, his arms, looking for more damage. "Did she do this to you?" Sean shook his head. "No, she was helping." "Helping?" Tony's eyes locked on Jennifer. "My son has bruises all over his face." "And you were? What exactly were you doing?" Jennifer's voice stayed calm, but her hands trembled. "Mr. Adams, if you just listen." "Listen to what?" His voice rose. "You've been here 2 weeks, and I walk in to find my son hurt and your hands all over him." "She was teaching me," Sean said, voice cracking, "how to talk to Brian. He's deaf, and nobody understands him. And he pushed me because." Tony froze. "Wait, someone at school did this?" Sean nodded. Tony turned to Jennifer, jaw clenched. "And you knew?" Jennifer lifted her chin. "He asked me not to tell you. That's not your decision to make." Silence cracked between them like breaking ice. "You're right," Jennifer said quietly. "I'm just the help." She turned and walked away. Tony stood there, Sean clinging to him, and realized something that made his stomach turn. He didn't know his son at all. And the woman he just destroyed. She might have been the only one who did. Before we continue, please subscribe to this video and let me know where in the world you're watching from. This story is about to reveal something powerful, which is that God puts people in our lives exactly when we need them, even when we're too blind to see it. Tony held Sean at arm's length, studying his face. The bruises looked a few days old, faded purple around the edges, yellowish in the center. His son had been walking around like this, and Tony had no idea. "How long has this been going on?" His voice came out quieter than he intended. Sean stared at the floor. "Last Thursday, during recess." Thursday, Tony's mind raced. "That was almost a week ago. Why didn't anyone call me?" "The school? Your teacher?" Sean's shoulders drew up toward his ears. "I didn't tell them." "Why not?" Silence. Tony glanced toward the hallway where Jennifer had disappeared. Then back to his son. "Sean, I need you to talk to me." "Who's Brian?" Sean's voice came out small. "A boy in my class. He's 8. He can't hear anything, and nobody knows how to talk to him, so he just sits by himself at lunch. And sometimes he gets really mad. Mad enough to hit you." "He didn't hit me." Sean looked up, eyes defensive. "He pushed me. I fell into the brick wall by the playground. It was an accident." Tony's jaw tightened. "Accident or not, he hurt you." "He didn't mean to, Daddy. He was just..." Sean's voice cracked. He was frustrated. Nobody ever understands him. "That's not your problem to fix." "But what if it is?" Sean's eyes filled with tears. "What if God put me there to help him?" The words hit Tony sideways. He opened his mouth and then closed it. Jennifer said that sometimes God uses regular people to show his love. Sean continued, wiping his nose. "She said that's what her brother needed when he was little. Someone to just try." "Her brother?" Sean nodded. "He's deaf too. Jennifer showed me pictures. She said he used to get in trouble all the time until someone learned sign language for him. So, I asked her if she could teach me so that I could communicate with Brian." Tony sat back on his heels, trying to process the strange hand movements. The way Sean had been so focused on Jennifer's fingers. "It wasn't dangerous. Why didn't you tell me any of this?" Sean looked away. You're always tired when you get home, and you look sad a lot. I didn't want to make it worse. The words cut deeper than the bruises on Sean's face. Tony pulled his son close, throat tight. You could never make anything worse, buddy. You hear me? Sean buried his face in Tony's shoulder. But even as Tony held him, a sick feeling settled in his stomach. He'd accused Jennifer of hurting his son. He'd looked at her like she was a threat, and all she'd been doing was answering a 7-year-old's prayer. Tony closed his eyes. What had he done? Tony found Jennifer in the small room off the kitchen, the one that came with the job. Her suitcase lay open on the bed, half filled with neatly folded clothes. She didn't look up when he knocked. Jennifer, I'll be gone by morning, she said quietly, placing a stack of books into the bag. Wait, Tony stepped inside. Sean told me about Brian, about the sign language. Jennifer's hands stilled, but she didn't turn around. I jumped to conclusions, Tony continued. I saw the bruises and I thought. He stopped. I'm sorry. Jennifer finally looked at him. Her eyes were tired. You don't have to apologize for protecting your son, Mr. Adams. I wasn't protecting him. I was accusing you. She turned back to her packing. You saw what you saw. I understand. Do you? Tony's voice dropped. Because I'm trying to figure out why I reacted that way, and I don't like the answer. Jennifer's shoulders tensed. You tell me. He leaned against the door frame. Would I have reacted the same if you looked different? If you were older or white? Jennifer turned slowly. Is that what you're asking? Tony didn't answer. Jennifer sat on the edge of the bed. Mr. Adams, I've been the help in a lot of homes. I know how this works. You hired me to clean and watch Sean while you're at work. You didn't hire me to care about him, but you do? Her voice cracked slightly. I do. Jennifer looked down at her hands. My little brother Nelson was deaf. Growing up, I watched people treat him like he was broken. Teachers gave up on him. Kids avoided him. And he'd come home crying because nobody wanted to try. She wiped her eyes quickly. When Sean came to me asking how to talk to Brian, I saw Nelson. I saw a chance to do for someone else's brother what I wished the world had done for mine. Tony's throat tightened. Where's Nelson now? He died 2 years ago. Car accident. God, Jennifer, don't. She stood, reaching for the suitcase. I knew what I was doing when I taught Sean without asking you. I knew it could cost me this job, but some things matter more than a paycheck. She zipped the bag closed. Tony's phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at the screen. Stamford Preparatory Academy. His heart dropped. It's Sean's school, he said. Jennifer looked up, fear flashing across her face. Tony answered. This is Tony Adams. The voice on the other end was calm but firm. Mr. Adams, this is Principal Panabaker. We need you to come in first thing tomorrow morning. There's been an incident involving your son. Tony barely slept. He sat in Sean's room most of the night, watching his son breathe, trying to remember the last time they'd really talked, really listened to each other. Morning came too fast. Jennifer was still there. She'd unpacked sometime in the night. Tony heard her moving around the kitchen at 5 a.m., making coffee like nothing had changed. I'll take him to school, Tony said. Jennifer nodded, pouring juice into Sean's cup. Principal Panabaker's expecting you at 8:30. How do you know? I called her last night. Told her you'd be there. Sean ate his breakfast quietly, eyes darting between them. He looked small in his chair, fragile in a way Tony hadn't noticed before. The drive to Stamford Preparatory was silent, except for the hum of the engine. Sean pressed his forehead against the window, watching trees blur past. Am I in trouble? He finally asked. No, buddy. I just need to talk to your principal about what happened. Are you going to tell them about Brian? Tony glanced in the rearview mirror. Should I? Sean's reflection looked scared. He'll get expelled. They always expel him. Boys. He's been to 4 schools already. His mom told Jennifer. Tony's hands tightened on the steering wheel. When did you meet his mom? I didn't, but Jennifer did. At pickup last week. Of course she did. Principal Panabaker's office smelled like old books and air freshener. She was in her 50s. Gray hair pulled back, reading glasses perched on her nose. Mr. Adams, thank you for coming, she gestured to a chair. I'll get right to it. We've had multiple complaints about a student in Sean's class. Brian McKnight, he's been physical with other children, and last week your son was injured. I'm aware you are? She looked surprised. Because we have no record of you being notified. Sean didn't report it. Principal Panabaker frowned. Well, several other parents have, and frankly, Mr. Adams, we're not equipped to handle a child with Brian's needs. We've recommended his mother find a specialized school, but she's resistant. What kind of needs? He's profoundly deaf, nonverbal. He has an IEP, but without a dedicated interpreter, which we can't afford. He's struggling, and when he struggles, he lashes out. Tony leaned forward. Has anyone tried to communicate with him in his language? Principal Panabaker blinked. I'm sorry. Sign language. Has anyone here learned sign language? Mr. Adams, we have 200 students. And my son learned it in 3 days. The principal's mouth opened slightly. A 7-year-old learned enough sign language in 3 days to try to talk to this kid, Tony continued, voice steady. And you're telling me a school full of adults can't figure it out? Principal Panabaker's face flushed. The office door opened. A woman stepped in, late 30s, exhausted eyes, work uniform still on. She looked like she'd come straight from a night shift. I'm sorry I'm late, she said breathlessly. Traffic was. She stopped when she saw Tony. For you. Principal Panabaker stood. Mrs. McKnight, this is your Sean's father, the woman said, eyes filling with tears. And Tony realized this was Brian's mother. Mrs. McKnight stood in the doorway, hands gripping her purse strap like it was the only thing holding her together. I'm so sorry, she said, looking directly at Tony. I heard what happened to Sean. I tried to get Brian to apologize, but he doesn't. He can't. Her voice broke. He doesn't know how to say sorry in a way people understand. Tony stood slowly. Mrs. McKnight, please. She held up a hand. Let me finish. I know you're angry. Every parent is angry. And I get it. I do. But he's not a bad kid. He's just tears spilled down her cheeks. He's just so alone. Principal Panabaker cleared her throat. Mrs. McKnight, we've discussed this before. Stamford simply doesn't have the resources. I know what you have. Mrs. McKnight's voice hardened. I know what you don't have. You've made that very clear. We're trying to do what's best for all students, except mine. The words landed heavily in the room. Tony looked at this woman, really looked at her. The uniform that said she'd worked all night. The lines around her eyes that spoke of years carrying weight nobody should carry alone. The way she stood like she was bracing for another rejection. How old is Brian? Tony asked quietly. Mrs. McKnight blinked, surprised he was speaking to her. 8. He turns 9 in January. And he's been to 4 schools. She nodded, wiping her face. They all say the same thing. We're not equipped. He needs specialized care. Like, my son is some kind of problem that needs to be fixed instead of a child who needs to be understood. Mrs. McKnight, Principal Panabaker began. No one is saying, yes, you are. Mrs. McKnight's voice shook. You've been saying it since October, and now you want me to pull him out so you don't have to deal with him anymore. Tony's chest tightened. He thought about Sean's bruises, about the fear in his son's voice when he said Brian would get expelled, about Jennifer teaching sign language in secret because she knew. She knew this is how it would go. What if someone here learned? Tony said. Both women turned to him. Learn what? Principal Panabaker asked. Sign language. What if someone on staff learned enough to communicate with Brian? Mrs. McKnight stared at him like he'd just spoken a language she didn't understand. Principal Panabaker shook her head. Mr. Adams, that would require hiring. I'll pay for it. Silence filled the office. You what? The principal said. Tony looked at Mrs. McKnight. Her hand had moved to her mouth, eyes wide. I'll fund whatever you need. Interpreter training. Whatever it takes. Why would you do that? Mrs. McKnight whispered. Tony thought about Jennifer, about Sean, about the way his son had looked at him last night, hopeful and terrified at the same time. Because my son asked me to. Mrs. McKnight's face crumpled. She covered her mouth with both hands, shoulders shaking, and Principal Panabaker sat back in her chair, stunned into silence. But Tony wasn't finished. There's one condition, he said. The woman who's been teaching my son sign language, Tony said. Jennifer Cortez. She's the one who will train your staff. Principal Panabaker's eyebrows lifted. Your housekeeper. She's not just. Tony stopped himself. She worked at the Boston School for the Deaf for 5 years. Her brother was deaf. If anyone can help Brian, it's her. Mrs. McKnight looked at him like he'd just offered her oxygen. The woman who talked to me at pickup. The one who signed Beautiful Boy to Brian. Tony's breath caught. She did. Last Thursday. Brian came home and wouldn't stop smiling. I didn't know why until he showed me the sign. Mrs. McKnight's voice trembled. Nobody's ever done that. Nobody's ever just seen him. Principal Panabaker folded her hands on the desk. Mr. Adams, while I appreciate the offer, we'd need to vet her credentials, run a background check, then do it. Tony said. Tony pulled out his phone. I'll have my lawyer send over everything you need by noon. This is highly irregular. So is expelling an 8-year-old for being deaf. The principal's face flushed. That's not what we're, isn't it? Tony's voice stayed calm, but there was steel underneath. Because that's what it sounds like to me, and I'm guessing that's what it sounds like to every parent in this building whose child is different. Mrs. McKnight pressed her hand to her chest, tears streaming freely now. Principal Panabaker stood. I'll need to discuss this with the board. You do that. Tony handed her his business card. You have until Friday. After that, I'm pulling Sean and enrolling him somewhere that actually cares about all their students. The principal's mouth opened, then closed. Tony turned to Mrs. McKnight. Can I meet him, Brian? She looked startled. You want to meet my son? If that's okay. Because Sean's been asking about him every night for a week. Tony's voice softened. I think maybe my son sees something I've been missing. Mrs. McKnight nodded, wiping her eyes. He's in the resource room. They keep him separated during morning activities. Separated. Her face said everything her words didn't. Tony followed her down the hallway, past bright classrooms full of children's laughter, past artwork taped to walls, past everything that should have included every child. Mrs. McKnight stopped at a door at the end of the hall. Through the small window, Tony could see a little boy sitting alone at a table, drawing with fierce concentration. That's Brian, she whispered. Tony watched him, dark curly hair, small hands gripping a crayon, the same age as Sean, but carrying weight no child should carry. And then Brian looked up. Their eyes met through the glass. And Tony saw something in that boy's face that made his heart stop. The same loneliness he'd seen in Sean's eyes every single day for 3 years. Mrs. McKnight opened the door quietly. Brian didn't look up. He was too focused on his drawing. Tony stepped inside, and the boy's head snapped toward him. His eyes went wide, then dark, defensive. It's okay, baby, Mrs. McKnight signed as she spoke. This is Sean's daddy. Brian's expression shifted. He pointed at Tony, then made a sign Tony didn't understand. He's asking if you're the one who's always working. Mrs. McKnight translated, her voice soft. The words hit Tony like a fist to the chest. Yes, he said, then felt stupid because Brian couldn't hear him. Mrs. McKnight signed his answer. Brian stared at Tony for a long moment, then went back to his drawing. Can I see? Tony asked, moving closer. Brian hesitated, then slid the paper toward him. It was a picture of 2 boys. One had dark curly hair, Brian. The other had lighter hair and was holding what looked like a baseball. Between them, a woman with kind eyes and dark skin held both their hands. Tony's throat went tight. Is that Jennifer? Mrs. McKnight looked at the drawing, then at Tony. He draws her every day. She's the only adult who's ever tried to talk to him here. Tony stared at the picture. At the way Brian had drawn Jennifer's smile. At the way the two boys stood close together, not separated by silence or fear. How many times has she come here? Just once. Last Thursday at pickup. She saw Brian standing alone and Mrs. McKnight's voice cracked. She walked right up to him and signed hello, friend. He didn't know what to do. Nobody's ever called him a friend before. Tony's chest ached. And your son, Mrs. McKnight continued. Sean Brian drew him, because Sean smiled at him in class last Thursday, just smiled. That's it. But to Brian, that was everything. Tony looked at this little boy who'd been labeled dangerous, violent, a problem to be removed. And all he saw was a child who'd been screaming in silence, waiting for someone, anyone, to hear him. I fired her, Tony said quietly. Mrs. McKnight's head snapped up. What? Last night I told Jennifer to leave. I thought. He couldn't finish his statement. You thought she hurt Sean? Tony nodded, shame burning through him. Mrs. McKnight stepped closer. Mr. Adams, that woman is the only reason my son still believes the world isn't against him. If you fired her, her voice shook. You didn't just take away his teacher, you took away his hope. Tony's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and his blood went cold. It was Jennifer. The message read, I'm sorry. I can't stay. Tell Sean I'll pray for him every day. Tell him God has a plan. She was leaving right now. And Tony had no idea if he could stop her. Tony didn't remember saying goodbye to Mrs. McKnight. Didn't remember running through the hallway or pushing through the front doors of Stanford Preparatory. He just ran. His hands shook as he dialed Jennifer's number. It went straight to voicemail. He tried again. Nothing. The drive home took 12 minutes. It felt like hours. Please, God, please let her still be there. He didn't know when he'd started praying again. Hadn't prayed since Elizabeth's funeral, but the words came anyway, desperate and roaring. The house appeared around the corner. Jennifer's car was still in the driveway. Tony slammed the brakes, barely putting the car in park before he was out and running toward the front door. She stood in the entryway, suitcase at her feet, keys in her hand. Jennifer. She turned. Her eyes were red, but her face was calm. Resolved. Mr. Adams, I left instructions for Sean's meals in the kitchen. His doctor's number is on the fridge. Tony's voice came out broken. Please don't go. Jennifer's jaw tightened. We both know this isn't working. You're right. It's not because I've been blind and stupid. He stopped trying to catch his breath. I just met Brian. Something flickered across her face. He drew a picture of you. Tony continued. You and Sean and him together. And his mother told me. His voice cracked. She told me you're the only person who's ever called her son friend. Jennifer looked away, tears sliding down her cheeks. I accused you of the one thing you'd never do. Tony said. I looked at you like you were a threat when you were the answer to a prayer I didn't even know I was supposed to be praying. Mr. Adams, Tony. My name is Tony. She met his eyes. I don't deserve you staying. He said I know that. But Sean does and Brian does. And maybe he swallowed hard. Maybe God didn't just put you in this house for my son. Maybe he put you here for all of us. Jennifer's hand trembled on her suitcase handle. I called the school. Tony continued. Told them you'd train their staff. Told them I'd fund everything. Interpreter, resources, whatever Brian needs, but only if you're the one leading it. Jennifer stared at him. Why would you do that? Because you were right about everything. About me not seeing my son. About me treating you like you were just. He couldn't finish. Just the help, she said quietly. You were never just anything. Silence stretched between them. Heavy, fragile. Jennifer looked down at her suitcase, at the keys in her hand, at the door she'd been about to walk through. If I stay, she said slowly, things have to change. They will. I promise. I don't want promises, Mr. Adams. Tony. She lifted her chin. I want you to show up for Sean, for yourself. Not just when something's wrong. Every day. Tony nodded. I will. And I need you to trust me. Really trust me. Because I can't do this job, wondering if you think I'm capable of hurting him. I do trust you. The front door swung open. Sean stood there, backpack on, face pale. Daddy. His voice was small, scared. Why is Jennifer's suitcase out? Tony and Jennifer both froze. I thought, Sean's eyes filled with tears. You said she could stay. You promised she wasn't leaving. Sean turned and ran. Not upstairs, not to his room, out the door, down the driveway, into the street. Tony's heart stopped. A car horn blared. The car screeched to a stop, inches from Sean. The driver, an elderly woman, sat frozen, hands gripping the wheel, face white with shock. Sean stood in the middle of the street, chest heaving, tears streaming down his face. Tony reached him first, dropping to his knees, hands running over Sean's arms. His face, checking for injuries that weren't there. Are you okay? Are you hurt? Sean shook his head, sobbing. Jennifer appeared beside them, breathless. Sean, baby, what were you thinking? You were leaving? Sean's voice came out in a wail. I saw your suitcase and you were leaving and I thought if I wasn't here, you'd stay. If I left instead, you wouldn't have to go. The words shattered something in Tony's chest. Oh, sweetheart. Jennifer pulled Sean into her arms. That's not how this works. You don't leave. You never leave. But Daddy said you had to go, and I don't want you to go. And Sean's words tumbled over each other, broken and desperate. Tony's throat closed. He looked at this little boy, his son, falling apart in the street because the one person who made him feel safe was walking away. After all, Tony had driven her away. I'm not going anywhere, Jennifer said, holding Sean tight. You hear me? I'm staying. Sean pulled back, eyes red and swollen. Promise? Jennifer looked at Tony. The question in her eyes was clear. Can I promise that? Tony nodded, his own eyes burning. I promise, Jennifer whispered, kissing Sean's forehead. The elderly woman finally got out of her car, shaking. Is he all right? Oh my God. He's okay, Tony said, voice. Thank you for stopping. She pressed a hand to her chest. I was praying the whole way down the street to drive carefully. God must have been listening. Tony looked at Sean in Jennifer's arms, at the way his son clung to her like she was the only solid thing in his world. God must have been listening. Maybe he had been all along. Let's get you inside, buddy, Tony said softly. They walked back to the house together, Sean between them holding both their hands. The suitcase still sat by the door. Jennifer walked past it without looking. Inside, Sean finally stopped crying. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, then looked up at Jennifer. Can I still learn the signs for Brian? Jennifer smiled through her tears. Every single day if you want. Sean nodded. Then he turned to Tony. Daddy, will you learn to? Tony's breath caught. You want me to? Yeah, so we can both talk to him together. Tony looked at his son, really looked at him, at the hope in his eyes, at the courage it took to ask. Yes, Tony said. I'll learn. Sean's face broke into the first real smile Tony had seen in months. And Jennifer looked at Tony with something that wasn't quite forgiveness yet, but it was close. That night, after Sean was asleep, Tony sat at the kitchen table. Jennifer appeared in the doorway, 2 cups of tea in her hands. She set one in front of him without a word. Thank you, Tony said quietly. For staying, for everything. Jennifer sat across from him. I didn't stay for you. I know. I stayed for Sean and for Brian, and because I think God wants me here. Tony nodded. Then I'm grateful he does. They sat in silence, the weight of the day settling around them. Finally, Jennifer spoke. There's something you need to know. Tony looked up. Brian's mother called me an hour ago. Jennifer said the school board meeting is tomorrow. They're voting on whether to keep Brian enrolled or ask him to leave. Tony's jaw tightened. What? Principal Panabaker pushed it through. Emergency session. Jennifer's hands wrapped around her mug. If they vote him out, he has nowhere else to go. This was his last chance. Then we stop them. Tony stood. I don't know yet. But we don't let that boy lose everything because adults are too afraid to try. Jennifer studied him for a long moment. You really mean that? Then you'd better be ready, she said quietly. Because this fight is just beginning. And Tony realized everything they'd been through, everything that had happened, it had all been leading to this. The school board meeting was packed. Parents filled every seat, standing room only in the back. Tony walked in with Jennifer beside him and Sean holding his hand. Mrs. McKnight sat in the front row, and Brian pressed against her side. Principal Panabaker stood at the podium, reading from a prepared statement. While we value inclusion, we must prioritize the safety of all students. Given the incidents involving Brian McKnight, the board recommends. I'd like to speak. Every head turned. Tony walked to the front, Sean still holding his hand. My name is Tony Adams. My son Sean is in Brian's class. He paused, looking at the faces staring back at him. 2 weeks ago, Brian pushed my son. Sean has bruises. He was hurt. Murmurs rippled through the room. Mrs. McKnight's face crumpled. And I was angry, Tony continued. I wanted someone to blame, someone to punish, because that's easier than asking why a child would lash out in the first place. He looked down at Sean, who nodded up at him. But my son, my 7-year-old son, he asked a different question. He asked how he could help, how he could understand, and that question changed everything. Tony's voice strengthened. Brian isn't violent. He's isolated. He spent his whole life in a world that doesn't speak his language, and we're punishing him for being frustrated. We're punishing him for being deaf. Mr. Adams, one board member interrupted, we understand your compassion, but this isn't compassion. This is basic human decency. Tony gestured to Jennifer. This woman taught my son sign language in 3 days. 3 days. And you're telling me a school full of trained educators can't do the same? Principal Panabaker's face flushed. It's not that simple. Yes, it is. Tony looked directly at the board. I'm offering to fund everything. Training, interpreter, resources, whatever Brian needs and whatever future students like him will need. But only if he stays. And if he doesn't, one board member asked, then I pull Sean, and I'll make sure every parent in this district knows that Stanford Preparatory expelled a child for being deaf. The room erupted. Principal Panabaker tried to restore order, but it was too late. Sean tugged on Tony's sleeve. Daddy, can I say something? Tony looked down, surprised. You want to speak? Sean nodded. Tony lifted him up so everyone could see. Sean's small voice carried across the room. Brian's my friend, and friends don't give up on each other. Then Sean looked at Brian and signed slowly, carefully, the words Jennifer had taught him. Friends forever. Brian's eyes went wide. Tears spilled down his cheeks. He signed back, hands shaking. Thank you. Mrs. McKnight broke down, sobbing, and the board voted unanimously. Brian stayed. 3 months later, Tony stood in the back of Sean's classroom, watching something he never thought he'd see. 22nd graders signing good morning to each other. To Brian, Brian sat in the middle of the room, surrounded by friends, laughing silently at something another boy signed. Sean caught Tony's eye and waved. Tony waved back, throat tight. Jennifer appeared beside him. You're here. I'm here, Tony said. Every Friday, just like I promised. She smiled. He's doing well. Because of you. Jennifer shook her head. Because of him and you and God. Putting us all in the right place at the right time. Tony watched his son. Watched Brian. Watched a classroom full of children who'd learned that differences weren't something to fear. They were something to embrace. I'm sorry, Tony said quietly. For everything I said that first day. For how I treated you, Jennifer looked at him. You were protecting your son. No, I was protecting my fear. He turned to face her. But you taught me what it really means to see people, to show up, to love like God loves. Jennifer's eyes filled. Tony, your family now, he said. Not the help, not the housekeeper. family, and I need you to know that. She wiped her eyes, smiling. I already knew. Sean ran over. Brian right behind him. Daddy, Brian wants to come to our house for dinner. Can he? Tony looked at Brian, who signed hopefully. Of course he can, Tony said. Jennifer translated. Brian's face lit up. Mrs. McKnight appeared in the doorway. Work uniform on, exhausted, but smiling. Thank you, she said to Tony, for everything. Thank me. Tony shook his head. Your son taught mine what courage looks like. We're the ones who should be thanking you. And as they all walked out together, Tony, Sean, Jennifer, Brian, and Mrs. McKnight, Tony realized something. He'd spent 3 years believing grief meant building walls. But God had sent Jennifer to show him the truth. Healing meant building bridges. And sometimes the people we think we're saving end up saving us instead. If this story touched you, let us know in the comments and tell us where in the world you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more emotional, dramatic, and unforgettable stories. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and keep watching.